Welcome to my video channel. I am the commander. My name is Francis. I hear all the time you should be skeptical. Let's be skeptical. You hear something, be skeptical. But the people always proposing skepticism never once considered that you're looking at them thinking, okay, well, I'm skeptical that you know anything about what you say you know.
Actually, I think that every single time I have a discussion with a theist, which is why I will go out of my way to present my case in a fully referenced fashion. I won't merely rely on proposition, attempting to argue via assertion. I will reference the sources of my knowledge where applicable to support my claims as required. I want people to be critical of what I say, and I have scolded atheists who have boasted highly illogical reasons for why they are atheist. You see, my arguments are dependent on one's ability and desire to review the arguments I present and their supporting evidence. Therefore, being skeptical is of no detriment to me. But I need to note that there's a difference between being skeptical and being incredulous, and that difference is faith, i.e. the rejection of evidence so one's beliefs can be protected from critique.
But before you think this is a rant against skepticism, it's not. Skepticism serves a very important purpose to help us to evaluate what's true or not, or who we can trust. The scientists and atheists love to pretend they're the most logical. If they were truly logical, they would at least allow that in the human heart, we want things to happen a certain way, even when they don't.
But we do account for that in science through various means. For a start, research is typically carried out by a set of people, not merely one. A place where this is particularly important is in psychology, where multiple observers will be used to reduce individual observer bias. But even if someone carries out research solo, they have to document each and every step with clarity. Why? Because a good piece of science is a repeatable piece of science, and to do that, you need exact replication. So if we want to measure, say, the Big Bang, we can carry out tests looking at such things as cosmic microwave background radiation, and those tests are repeatable. This allows independent institutions to co-verify another institution's results, decreasing the problems you mentioned. Therefore, all you are doing here is deploying FUD. That's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. It's a form of poisoning the well, making the suggestion that scientists and atheists can be wrong, can be liars, as shown on screen, with the insinuation that because of this, they are wrong, they are liars. It's something you seem to enjoy doing, as we saw it in your last video as well.
So you prove it to me that there's nothing after life. Okay, I can. All right, fine.
That's not how it works. You have to prove heaven exists since you are making the claim that it does. This is basic philosophy on the burden of proof. If you want to assert some mystical realm exists, you back up that claim. Your actions come down to intellectual laziness on your part, where you attempt to shift that burden.
Prove to me that everybody who's ever had a near-death experience, and they see the white tunnel, or they meet people they know, and they come back and they tell everybody, prove to me that all those people are insane. Okay, you can't.
Do you just mean the near-death experiences which report seeing the Christian ideas of heaven and God, or all near-death experiences which tend to reflect something about a person's social upbringing? Because you can't pick and choose. If NDEs are evidence for an afterlife and God, they certainly don't prove that the Christian God is the only God or the way to the afterlife. But the fact is, they're not evidence for anything, because people who experience NDEs aren't brain dead. All clinically dead means is that their pulse has stopped, i.e. it's no longer pumping to supply oxygen to the brain. The brain can survive for several minutes after this point. It's also not evidence that said people are insane, as you throw out here. Their brain was merely firing off a chemical cocktail as it went into a state of shock from lack of oxygen. NDEs are not some mysterious thing, it's just erotic asphyxiation without the erotic that is later explained by the brain creating false memories to try and fill in the gaps. That's why we can replicate the results using drugs like ketamine. To quote Dr. Karl Jansen, who conducted studies on the specific qualities of ketamine, they had to say this: "It can reproduce every feature of the NDE, from rapid trips through dark tunnels into light and the conviction that one is dead, to seeing spirits, telepathic communion with God, out-of-body experiences, mystical states, peace and tranquility." And later on in their study, 30% of normal subjects given ketamine insisted that they had not been dreaming or hallucinating, but that the events had really happened. The American Psychiatric Association definition is also worth noting. A hallucination has the immediate sense of reality and true perception. Transient hallucinatory experiences are common in individuals without mental disorder. So you see, I don't have to prove they were insane, just high from lack of oxygen. So don't presume to tell me what I can and cannot do.
Alright, so let's go to the other thing. Let's go to the doubt that Jesus was born, that Jesus Christ existed. It's a great position to hold because you can't prove it either.
Well, it's correct to note the fact that there is not a single secular source from the time that Jesus was supposedly alive which notes the existence of Christ. The earliest mentions are either by those noting the existence of Christians, or are from edited texts such as Josephus, who was born 4 years after the apparent crucifixion, who then wrote Antiquities of the Jews in 93 or 94 CE, 60 years after the supposed crucifixion. Said text was then edited to include mentions of Christ, and is therefore not valid. If you have any actual secular evidence, then by all means, go ahead. Present it.
However, there's multiple witnesses that have written books and letters and stuff about this Jesus, and they were closer to the birth date recorded on the calendar for him. So by proximate knowability, which is a scale of the value of information assessed by police and military units, right? Proximate knowability means somebody that's closer to an event that occurred is more reliable than somebody who's across the continent or across the world who says, you know what, it didn't happen. Well, how the hell would you know? So therefore, proximate, by just order of proximate knowability, people who wrote the letters of the Bible are more valuable as information sources and as far as witnesses to events, and especially the Jesus Christ concept, than a guy who in the 21st century says, you know what, Jesus didn't exist and it was all made up. A healthy skepticism is important for you to evaluate who's talking to you, because we are all part of the 21st century. So therefore, somebody's opinion is equal to another guy's opinion. What you start to do to classify his value of information, or his PK value, is like how close he is to the source.
Completely false, as is demonstrated by archaeology frequently. Problem is, you never name the system you are supposedly using in your video, so I asked you for further clarification in the comments down below, where you admitted you didn't know the name or the details surrounding this process. It was simply mentioned to you in passing, and then you fabricated all the details. Thankfully, I have a good friend who works with the UK police and brought this to them, and the closest thing we could find was the 555 system used by the British Police Intelligence, which I brought to you to see if this was the sort of system you were referring to, and you sort of gave me a yes-no on claiming it was closer to the more accurate CIA model. If you find the system you were actually referring to, I'd be happy to review that, but for now, this is all I have to work from. The first thing that the 555 system requires evaluation of is not the proximity one has to the case being reported, but rather the tested reliability of that source as either reliable, untested, or not reliable. Then we have your notion of proximity, i.e. how close to an event or original source were they, which is divided into one of 5 categories: known directly, known indirectly with corroboration, known indirectly to the source, not known, or suspected to be false. This is the sort of proximity scale police are actually interested in, not how close to an event one was time-wise. That never comes up. In places with poor education and infrastructure, such as the Bronze or Iron Age, things couldn't really be challenged or corrected like they can today. Critical thought was not well dispersed as religion still had an iron grip on the lives of everyday people, meaning that information had a very short half-life, if you wish to call it that. So writings from an anonymous source with no archaeological corroboration would be regarded no higher than, say, the writings 2, 5, 10 centuries down the line. Now I need to be clear that this is simply looking at one factor among many, and I'm sure we'll discuss those other factors in a second.
Now there's the contradiction problem. And this is where a lot of atheists and rationalists say, well, that's proof that the Bible is full of crap. The thing is, if you talk to a police officer and he does accident investigations, if he has 5 or 6 eyewitness reports, he will tell you, and you can go ask a cop this who's ever done it, that there are 5 or 6 different ways that this accident could have occurred because everybody has a distinct point of view. A point of view, however, is a relative position to the viewer. The actual event, the objective thing that occurred, that is, the car accident, is something that is real and surpasses the subjectivity or the point of view of each person writing an eyewitness report. Okay, so what the police officer has to do is then try and reassemble the accident in order to correctly assess blame and responsibility, etc., etc. Okay? So that's what they do with accident investigations.
You've got this truly reductionist understanding of eyewitness testimony that really misses a lot of details relevant to a specific case. Police will take into account details on what a person was doing beforehand to find out whether they were distracted when the crash occurred, or whether they have any connection to any of the people involved so could possibly benefit from the situation. But the police are rarely reliant on eyewitness reports alone, instead preferring forensic evidence or video recordings of an event to corroborate what the witnesses claim happened. For one, you'd have a damaged car to work from, something we don't have from any of the biblical accounts. Then we also have to consider collective false memory, dubbed the Mandela effect. It's named that because in the modern age, with the internet, we still have people who believe Nelson Mandela is dead. That's not to mention that the Gospels are not eyewitness reports. Police have to be very careful in how they take a statement because psychology has shown that without adequate training, the information can be made unreliable. The accounts of the Gospels were not taken by modern-day police forces. They were written down by entirely anonymous people with potential gain.
So the argument against the Bible as valuable eyewitness reports or letters recorded by people who were close to the time of Jesus, you know, that all those contradictions prove that it was a waste of time and it's all a big fat lie. It's actually the reverse. The contradictions prove that multiple people are writing down what they remember or what they know in their own way. That's all they're doing. They actually are witnesses, and those multiple points of view represent the different ways people understood and remembered Jesus Christ. And that's what you got to remember when you're reading the Gospels. Certain people remember certain things differently.
What absolute rubbish. There's a difference, and then there's incompatibility. And then, of course, there's supposedly written with the guidance of an all-knowing, all-powerful God, yet seemingly worse than a lot of writings from that period. Not to mention, it's not just inaccuracies between the Gospels, but historical and scientific inaccuracies as well. Remember the 555 system I brought up earlier, based on your argument at the start of the video, and how it required information about the reliability of a source. This score is used in tangent with how someone came to know said information to plot it on the intelligence confidence matrix. So let's start with the Book of Matthew. The Book of Matthew is an anonymous text written sometime between 80 and 90 CE, so between 47 and 57 years after the apparent crucifixion. This is almost certainly not a first-person account, but we don't even know if it's a second-hand account either, or how many people the story passed through before being written. Therefore, it rates a D, not known, on the left side of the matrix. So now we can move on to reliability. According to the Skeptics Annotated Bible, a source you and the rest of my viewers are welcome to check for yourself, we have 32 accounts of clear scientific or historical error. Now, I may be willing to forgive some of these science aspects were it not for the whole inspired by your God element to your claim. If your God is truly all-knowing and all-powerful, and the Gospels are their way of getting the message of not only Jesus, but the very nature of the universe as having been formed by some cosmic being to us, then I expect to see that reflected in said Gospels. I certainly don't expect to see such sloppy blunders as Matthew chapter 4 verse 8, where the devil supposedly took Jesus to the top of a high mountain, and from that point showed them every kingdom on earth. You know, describing a flat earth, not the spherical earth we actually have. I also don't expect historical errors like the claim made in chapter 2 verse 16, where King Herod supposedly had all the boys under the age of 2 put to death. This is an event not only lacking in physical corroboration, but is also absent from any historical writing, even though we have historians who wrote about Herod in great depth. The Gospel of Matthew is therefore not only not known as to its proximity to the events it describes, but also unreliable, giving it a low quality on the intelligence-confidence matrix. Moving on to the Gospel of Mark, we have a text thought to be written 66 to 70 CE, so 33 years after the apparent crucifixion, by a completely anonymous author and therefore falls under category D, not known. Like the book of Matthew, it is seemingly ignorant to the facts of the universe, as seen in the claim that the mustard seed is the smallest of all seeds in chapter 4, verse 31. On top of this, we have the claim from chapter 5, verse 33, that when Christ finally died, there were 3 hours of complete darkness, a phenomenon not recorded anywhere in history by any nation on Earth. These scientific and historical errors, along with 20 others, demonstrate the Gospel of Mark to be unreliable. This and the anonymous authorship means that the Gospel in question is of low quality. The Gospel of Luke, which was written in 80 CE by an anonymous author, falls under D, not known, shares in both the claim of the flat earth in chapter 4 verse 5 and the apparent complete darkness in chapter 23 verses 44 through 45. 2 of 34 complete errors. Therefore, unreliable, quality low. The Gospel of John, written anonymously between 90 and 110 CE, category D, not known, asserts that dead wheat germinates in chapter 12, verse 24, 1 of 10 errors, unreliable, quality low. I could go on, but I think you get the picture about those errors. By the standards of police intelligence, the standards you invoked earlier, not one of these sources or any of the other books in the Bible would be trusted. Conflicting reports is a problem police seek to overcome, not something to be paraded as evidence for said claims. Fact is, there are many major flaws in your comparison, as mentioned previously with your reductionist and woefully unequipped view on eyewitness reports. This is therefore a false comparison. The Gospels were not written any time near the supposed time of Jesus, were anonymous, and all the writers had a lot to benefit from propagating said myth, whether they truly believe what they'd heard from a friend of a friend or not. Not to mention that people today know there's an actual likelihood of them being found out forensically, which means if they lie, they could be punished for perverting the course of justice. The Gospel writers did not have that concern. You have therefore failed to make the case for the historicity of Christ, let alone their divinity. There could have been a historical Jesus, but to pretend it's a proven thing is dishonest. And anyway, it wouldn't prove their supposed magic.
Ask a group of kids who broke the vase in the living room. If there's 5 kids, there'll be 500 stories, let alone 5 stories.
So let me just get this straight. Your argument for the quality of the 4 Gospels and the rest of the New Testament is that children lie for their own benefit. Are you listening to your arguments as you make them, or just saying what first comes into your mind?
Human nature is very much consistent, and the writings do not say it's a lie. They say, this is the way I remember it, and they write it down. So the wild inconsistencies really aren't that wild when you think about it, because in the consistent line, Jesus Christ existed. He did these miraculous things, and these guys recorded it. Some recorded more than not. Some might have known his mother more, which is what the Gospel of John sort of reflects, that because when she came to live with him, she would tell him more things about what Jesus said and what he did and what he meant. So that's why you got to understand the value of information. The PK value, the proximate knowability. Remember that scale when you start to assess information or opinions that are given to you by whoever, including myself. All right, so in the next one, we're going to talk about Jesus Christ, a man's man. We're going to go right into the time of Christ, as though you were just a witness to see this guy walk around and talking, and see what it's all about.
Well, that's not much of an issue. You've got me here to fact check everything you say, and so far in the 2 videos I've responded to, I've had to point out errors in nearly every single point you have made. Consider that fact for a second. You've warped the way police intelligence is handled. You've used false comparison after false comparison. There's nothing of value in your video. You completely miss the point when it comes to authenticating the historical nature of Christ, which is a big step you need to overcome before you can even attempt to prove their divinity. It's not enough, but it's something you need to do first. I'm all too happy playing along with your witless games as you go on and talk about the supposed nature of Christ, because I enjoy being thorough. But don't expect a break from me anytime soon. There are a few things which I'd just like to add here at the end of this video. The first is a massive thank you to everyone who has ever donated to me via Patreon. Your fantastic support has given me the ability to keep this channel going, and I hope to continue producing content in the years to come. Secondly, I would like to thank anyone who has ever interacted with this channel. Your shares, likes and dislikes, as well as your comments of both approval and disapproval, have ensured constant feedback, allowing me to improve my work. Last of all, I would like to express my desire that you treat any of the people displayed throughout the video with respect. Whilst it is true that ideas do not demand respect, and there are many in fact which deserve reprehension, we must be careful on how we tackle said ideas in ensuring we are not simply targeting the person. In short, be the compassionate side of reason. So take care, and I'll see you next time.